Well, I'm thrilled to be joined now by the Federalist's elections correspondent, Brianna Lyman. Brianna, thank you so much for joining me here on the U.S. Report tonight. And I want to talk about, first of all, what I think is one of the most important stories in American politics right now. That is the New York City mayoral race. And it got very fiery in a debate between the Democrat-turned-independent Andrew Cuomo, the Democrat socialist frontrunner Socialist Mamdani, and the Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa at a debate the other night. Have a little look. Here's a bit of a sample of that.
We desperately need to build more housing in this city, and I also know that the jobs we create in the building of that housing should be good jobs as well.
What a political answer. What is your opinion, Zoran?
Yes or no?
Come on.
Yes or no?
What is your opinion? Yes or no, Zoran?
Truth.
Don't be a politician here.
I got it. They're pointing out what I was about to.
Please answer
the question.
No, I think on the stage you can see two people appealing for the Republican Party's votes.
And as a New Yorker, I love how fiery it got there. But Brianna, is anything that's going to happen in this race change the outcome, which is going to be this Democrat, socialist, hard leftist is going to wind up taking over arguably the most important city in America?
Yeah, unfortunately, the only thing that could be a possible saving grace, and I mean, this is still a long shot, is for Curtis Sliwa to drop out so that voters can coalesce around Andrew Cuomo. The New York Post had a recent poll come out and it showed that if it's a two-way race, Andrew Cuomo trails by somewhere between 5 to 6% behind Mamdani. But what was interesting about that poll is 78% of undecided voters are 55 or older. There is a really good chance that if you're 55 or older, you're not voting for a socialist like Mamdani, you are voting for Andrew Cuomo. And if we make it a binary choice, I do think it gives Cuomo that extra edge that could possibly deliver him a slim victory. But as things stand now, we're going to have a socialist mayor.
It seems absolutely shocking to me, but what also shocked me, and I spoke about this earlier in the program, is the way that Mamdani has used anti-Trump sentiment in New York to leverage himself into this position here. There was this cleanup of all of the vendors, illegal aliens, illegal migrants from Africa on Canal Street. And New Yorkers didn't say, oh, thank you, federal government, for cleaning up this eyesore that the New York police left there for years. No, they went out and protested. I mean, do New Yorkers just get what they deserve at this point?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, this ties into the national conversation we're having over here, which is Democrats are the party that stands against the rule of law. ICE agents are enforcing longstanding federal immigration law. If Democrats don't like the law, that means they don't like sovereignty. But if they don't like the law, they should try to win a big enough majority to change the law. But until then, ICE is enforcing longstanding federal immigration law. And polling indicates Americans want illegal aliens out, whether they are violent or not. We want them gone. And the fact that some of these aliens have been here for years, some of them have had previous removal orders, just goes to show you how Democrats in particular have turned a blind eye to the biggest crisis facing America right now.
And, you know, just on that whole idea of enforcing the law, it seems like the Democrats have a real selective enforcement problem here, too, because, you know, they're the first people to regulate our lives, law-abiding citizens' lives, you know, regulate how we use our energy, regulate this, our businesses, and everything like that. The phrase anarcho-tyranny is something that we hear sometimes, and it seems like this is what we saw in California, and this is what's coming to New York, and this is going to be what whoever the Republican nominee in 28 is going to have to run against, because they'll say, don't do this to the rest of America.
Yeah, and I think, you know, California looked to Portland, for example, with the anarcho-tyranny we're seeing there. And Democrats have decided to make that as though that is a peaceful protest. They're trying to turn it into a First Amendment argument. But Americans voted for President Trump for many reasons. But one of the big ones was law and order. Nobody wants to see a repeat of 2020 with the riots, right? The summer of love that we had. And the fact that Democrats are not willing to listen to the entire country, which shifted right in November, and instead try to double down that these are peaceful protests, that we can't enforce the law because they're fighting the good fight. It's going to turn away voters come 2026 and 2028.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And another thing that I think voters are going to get pretty sick of, too, is this government shutdown, which is continuing here. And there was an amazing admission from Democrat House Whip Catherine Clark talking about how struggling families are actually now political leverage in the negotiations. Have a listen to this.
I mean, shutdowns are terrible. And of course, there will be, families that are going to suffer. We take that responsibility very seriously. But it is one of the few leveraged times we have.
I mean, talking about beatings will continue until morale improves here. This idea that you just use struggling families to make a political point, this must be backfiring on them, surely.
Well, I think it's easy for her to say that when her paycheck still keeps coming. Notice she hasn't said she's not going to take it, anything like that. Surprisingly, Democrats haven't faced nearly as much pushback as they should. And I think it's part and parcel because the propaganda press is doing their bidding. The Democratic-led media is trying to make this as though it is a Republican shutdown. I don't think voters are necessarily buying into that, especially when you have people like Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, calling out his own party for holding Americans and families hostage. But so the reason that I think it's going to keep going is until there is enough public and media pressure on Democrats to open the government with a clean CR, they're going to dig their heels in. They're going to keep using American families as hostages and political pawns, all because they want to give illegal aliens free health care.
And this is just something to bring, our Australian viewers up to speed on. To pass that vote, to pass that continuing resolution to keep the government funded, they need 60 votes, not a majority of 51 to make that happen. So that's why the Democrats can still hold the government to hostage on this here. But finally, before I let you go, we talk a lot about political violence on this show and the threat of it coming particularly from the left. Well, turns out Republican Senator Eric Schmidt has maybe heard this call because he's going to be chairing a hearing next week on this threat. Here's a little bit of what he had to say on the matter.
So we're going to have a hearing on it. We're going to have Michael Knowles come testify, who was a victim of a firebombing himself, of what's really behind all this and what are the strategies moving forward. We need to go at this thing and be aggressive, not just play defense, but play offense, because this is a real threat to our country and the fabric of our constitutional republic.
Brianna, what are we expecting to get out of this? Will we find out that there are big money donors, including some that might be quite familiar to our viewers, behind some of these groups that are funding so much of the mayhem in American streets?
Yeah, I think the purpose of this hearing is going to be to thread that needle, particularly of George Soros, someone who donates millions of dollars to organizations like Indivisible, which was behind the No Kings protest, other organizations that have really propped up these protests that also happen to turn violent. And this is an opportunity right now. Republicans have 1 year, in case we end up losing the House, they have 1 year to get and come to terms with who was funding these protests, right? People show up with the signs, they all look the same. You're telling me 1,000 people got together and made the same signs? Of course not, right? There's someone backing these fundings. If you're backing a peaceful protest, fine, but these never turn out to be peaceful in the most part. And we know that political violence in America is coming from the left to the right. We have to figure out, is that organized? Is this part of a larger plan?
Brianna, you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot more to it, and I'm looking forward to finding out what that is. Brianna Lyman, thank you so much for joining me tonight.